Our biggest fear was encountering a enemy element that was larger than we are. As long as they were smaller than us, we thought had the upper hand. But um, so we were mostly the biggest. My worst nightmare was running into an NVA company or being on a fire base when a ground attack occurred with where there was large quantities of attackers. The platoon leaders told me to take 3 guys and go out on a patrol. And so we did. We went off the fire base and we went out. And he said, set up an ambush on a nightly basis and move every day and radio back and tell me what you see. So I'm out here and we're on a trail and we're setting up a 4-man ambush. And I'm thinking to myself, this is nuts. If my biggest fear is coming into contact with a larger force, why would I go out in only a force of 4? All it takes is a squad now, and they outnumber us. And so those are the kinds of things that gave me nightmares, was dreaming about that. And I encountered a guy when I was in the convalescent hospital that was down there, and he was from the Delta. And he told me how his platoon was overrun. And he said they set up at night and they didn't know they were setting up right next to a VC platoon or company. And the VC just picked up and overran them with superior numbers. And they said, those bastards, they don't care how many of them die. They just want to make sure that all of you die. It doesn't matter if they kill 25 of you and it costs them 50. That's a big victory. And so he experienced my worst nightmare. If an enemy is literally 10, 15 meters ahead, he can hear you coming before you ever know he's coming. So it's an extremely nervous situation to be in that thick of jungle and moving through it, because you just can't stay as quiet as you'd like to.
And that an ambush could break any second.
Yeah. And anything could happen, and you could have big danger right ahead, and you wouldn't even know it. And then you think, well, I'd rather be in the wide open. No, you wouldn't. That's equally frightening for a different reason. And that is, if they see you, you have nothing to, you have no protection, nothing to hide behind. So the point is, there's really no comfortable situation.
Yeah. That really is a theme that's come up in my discussions with Vietnam vets for the combatants. There really aren't many opportunities to kind of take a breath and unwind. I mean, I guess when you're maybe on an outpost or something like that, although even then, you can have mortars coming in and things like that.
Yeah.
Just in your experience, this might seem like a kind of a weird and random question, but in your experience, how long could soldiers, stay out in the field, say in the jungle, like this photo we're looking at, before I'm not talking about, guys cracking and falling to pieces, but before the tension just became counterproductive and, you had to get out of there to take a breath? How long, in your experience, could the soldiers stay in this kind of context with this kind of tension, even if there's not a firefight, but you don't know if there's going to be a firefight, you're just there with this tension? How long can soldiers do that in your experience before they really do just have to get out?
Well, a long time. The longest that I was ever out was about 5 weeks. And I didn't see a difference in people's behavior at the 5th week as from the 1st or 2nd week. It's like there's a lot of things to learn how to get mentally acclimated to. And in other words, all these things are happening and you have to deal with them. And so I developed psychological methods for dealing with it. And the only time that I ever broke down a little bit in was back once the mission was over, and I was back and had a couple of days to truly relax at the big base camp. And a couple of times I had my own little private pity party. Nobody ever knew, but it was kind of like, oh my God, how long do I have to keep doing? It was a feeling of since I've gotten here, 24 hours a day, I'm always doing something that I do not want to be doing. And there's very little break from that. Even in the rear, okay, you get to have a barbecue, you get to watch a movie or something like that. But it's stuff that I don't want to be doing. And so after a while, that wore on me where, I'd love to just forget about entertainment. I'd like to wash a car. I haven't driven a car in months. That kind of thing. I miss the normal day-to-day activities of life that I'm completely separated from. And
Wow.
so I had to develop mental ways to cope with that. And so after my little pity party, which only lasted 15 minutes, and I suck it up and get ready for the next mission kind of thing.
I want to ask you about the psychological methods you developed, but is part of the reason why, what you're calling the pity parties, fully understandable, is part of the reason why those happen only when you're not out in the field, is because if they happened in the field, that would be kind of a way of letting the other guys down.
Not as much as just I'm in the field and I'm going minute to minute. I'm concentrated on what's going on, and so I don't have time, and I don't want to let those thoughts in. I'm at work. When I'm back and with a couple of days off, I'm not at work. I'm relaxed. Now those thoughts can come in, but I just push them out in the field because there's no point in entertaining them at that point. I'm just going through the motions of doing my job.
So I think you just answered this question in part, but you referred to the psychological methods. So I'm guessing what that means is you're telling yourself to
Yes.
think a certain way. You're telling yourself to act a certain way. What are these methods that you're talking about?
Well, I have conversations with myself in my mind, but it started the very first day when I got through orientation with 4th Infantry Division, and I was put out on the helipad to go join the recon platoon. And I was sitting there with a pile of supplies that they had ordered, food and ammo and water and all that stuff. And so I'm just waiting. And late in the afternoon, the dispatcher came over and he said, well, your platoon's been ambushed today, so they're unable to receive resupply. So you can go back and get a good night's sleep and come back at 0600 tomorrow. And so I go back to the barracks, and that was actually one of my hardest nights. I'd never even been a day in the field because of this thought in my head. Oh my God, I got like 340 something days to go. They're ambushed the first day. I don't think I'm going to make it through this. And yeah, that's the thought that's trying to get in there. But what I told myself in my mind that stuck with me for the entire time was, I knew the statistic that in a given battle, for every soldier that is killed, there's approximately 5 that are wounded. So I'd tell myself that, there's 5 times better chance you're going home wounded than dead. And then there's all those that don't get killed or wounded. So my chances in any firefight, the chances are I'm going to survive this. So I was always thinking that. I was always thinking my chances are good. I was always thinking that. It was on a fire base that we were just going into, the whole battalion. It was a hill. It was kind of a bare hill with low grass, and it was called LZ Challenge, and it was one that had been set up in the past many times, I believe. And so we were coming in, and the last time it was a base, they had filled in the bunkers, and so the guys were digging out where the holes used to be and making, building up things. So the thing hadn't even barely hardly gotten started, getting constructed. And my platoon leader said, take a few guys and make a run down the hill over that way, and see what you can find down there. Let's see what's down there, but stay in sight, don't get out of sight. So we went down the hill, and since it had been a previous fire base, the enemy had put punji sticks around it. And when we turned around to come back, I just walked into it, and it went right above the top of my boot and went about 1.5 inches deep into my shin.
So these were sticks then that were just sticking out of the ground at an angle?
Yeah, and they were hard to see because they were in reeds that were the same color as the bamboo, and so I didn't even see one before I hit that one. I wasn't looking for them because I hadn't seen any.
So how long did dealing with the consequences of walking into this punji stick, how long did that knock you out of the field?
A month, almost exactly a month. It was a ride to the field surgical center, surgery, and then another flight to a convalescent hospital.
And you had a significant chunk of your lower leg cut out, right?
Yeah, well, they, yeah, when they did the surgery, and when I was in the hospital, when they finally took the bandage off, I was kind of aghast because it looked so much worse after the surgery, and I'm going, oh, what the heck? And it was a hole bit before. Now it's a big gaping wound. And the nurse explained that those punji sticks, they put human feces on them to cause infection, and that goes that deep into your wound. So it's impossible to clean that. They have to cut the flesh and remove the flesh all around. And that's why it was as bad looking as it was. And then after they did the surgery, and after a while they sewed it up, and a few weeks later I was back in the field.
Well, but as I read your account of this, I mean, my main thought was, this is how folks who are heavily outgunned, how they respond, and just how effective that was from their
Yeah,
point of view. I mean, one stick knocks
yeah,
the soldier out for a month.
yeah. And there was a number of us that got punji stick wounds, so it was not uncommon. Yeah, my hat's off to their
Yeah.
ingenuity, because um, you think about how far they are from their base camp, and they don't get to fly back and get a couple days off. And I have no idea how they got all the ammunition. The food they had to carry it all in there. How much can one guy carry? And that's why the elephants, we never saw the elephants, but we saw elephant tracks, and that's definite proof of an elephant. And I think those were hauling equipment in.
Wow.
And I don't know how they did it. It was pretty impressive.
Is this a thought you had at the time? And I'm wondering about, you're dealing primarily with NVA where you are. So these guys have come down the trail from North Vietnam. As you say, they can't get on a Huey and go back to base and, kind of take a breath for a couple of days. At the time, what was your perception of them as an adversary?
Well, that's well, I definitely respect. You'd be a fool not to respect them, but I got to admit that in order to be at peace with trying to kill them, I had to pretty much demonize them. In my mind, I had to see them as evil, or inhuman or something. And so that was the way I looked at it. Was these are guys that are creeping, crawling around, trying to kill my buddies, trying to kill me, and it's us or them. So we'll try to make it them.
You describe, if I remember it correctly, after a firefight or a meeting with the NVA of some kind. There is an NVA there who was killed. And so you're going through, you know, pulling things out of his pockets, and you describe you know, on this occasion, you pull a photo out. It's a photo of a woman, maybe his wife, maybe his girlfriend. And you write about how that, you know, seeing that photo, kind of puts you in a different state of mind. What was that?
Well, it defeated my, you know, my scenario. You know, it showed that he wasn't inhuman and he was just like me. So I kind of hated that I had evidence that I was wrong.
Mm,
But
because
uh,
he's carrying in his pocket a photo of a woman.
yeah, yeah, it's like you know, so it caused me a lot of I, I I remember the feeling at the time was just stoic. I just went silent, you know, it's just like and whatever distress that caused me, like everything else, I had to be over it by, you know, the end of the day. Couldn't carry it into the next day.
I'm looking here at a photo. These look like ARVN soldiers walking through a village.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Did you did you work much with ARVN forces?
Only at the very end, after the Cambodian incursion, there was a obvious effort to have us work with. We're trying to turn the war over to the ARVN, so we started having operations with the ARVN, so, and that's basically what got me out of the army. um, you know, the ARVN were camped right next to us, and they would come over in the evening and because we'd give them the sea rations that we couldn't stomach, and they loved them.
Mm.
And after a couple nights of that, one of the guys came over and, you know, without even speaking English, he made it clear, you know, you come have our food kind of thing. And of the 25 or so guys, most of them said, yeah, it's all right, no thanks, I'm good. But me and two other guys went over there. I thought, well, let's see what happens. And we went over and they were cooking a stew in a steel pot helmet. And they had gone out and stolen some peppers out of a farmer's field, and they shot a sparrow and put, you can see the beak and the feet sticking out and all that, and they're cooking it up, and so I had some of that, and the next day I had a temperature of 105 degrees, and my war was over.
I'm sorry to be laughing, but
It's funny.
yeah, I'm just like, so what was it that made you think this was a good idea to eat this stuff?
I just thought, let's be hospitable
Okay.
and see what they do and what they eat and whatever, you know, that's
A
all.
cultural experience, as if
A
you haven't had
cultural
enough,
experience, totally.
if
And
you hadn't had enough cultural experiences by that point
yeah,
already.
my first cultural experience, and it was, and I was done. Yeah, I went back to the hospital, and after a couple of days, they told me I had malaria.
Mm.
And okay, I got malaria. That I don't know what that means, but or what, you know, how that plays out. But that doctor went on R&R, and when the replacement came in, he looked at my records, which were on a clipboard at the foot of the bed. And he said, well, what's wrong with you, soldier? And I said, I got malaria. And he looked it over, he looked at me and he said, no, I don't think so. He said, you got jaundice. That's not malaria. And so he took a bunch of tests, and days later, he came back and said, you got um, um, hepatitis and some other disease. And I forget what it was. Two diseases. And he said, I talked to the other doctors. Nobody's ever treated somebody that had both at the same time. And either one could take you 3 to 5 months to get over. The two together, we have no clue how much time you got left. And I said, I got an early out coming up in about a month. And he said, okay, well, we're going to send you to Japan for evaluation. So
Wow.
I never got back to the field again.
That was it. And were both of those illnesses traceable to the meal of the night before?
That's my assumption because I got 105 temperature hours after eating that.
Sure.
And they said that the hepatitis could definitely come from eating something really nasty.
Just real, I want to come back to the Arvin guys, but since we're talking about food, just real quick, what was your favorite sea ration and your least favorite?
Well, least favorite's easy. That's ham and eggs, hands down. They've been in the can for over a decade. You know, how good could that be? But I liked kind of the little meat patties. You put a stick in the edge of they're like a cylinder. You put it in the meat, you know, a stick in the side and put it over a flame. And I'd have my sister mail me packets of barbecue sauce that she picked up at Arby's. I kept a lot of those on and so I just barbecue those and put barbecue sauce on them. That was pretty good. Actually, I like most of the sea rations.
Um, these Arvin guys then, so you go through most of your tour and you're not working with them, but we're in the era now of Vietnamization.
Yeah.
And so whatever amount of interaction you had with the Arvin forces, you've said that you had to respect the NBA. How about the Arvin? What was your perception of them?
Well, I wasn't fighting against them, so I didn't have. I was kind of ambivalent. Um, I knew that the leadership didn't have a real high opinion of their capability, but I didn't have any reason to believe that. That's just because I didn't have a lot of experience working with them.
I'm looking at another photo here. I'm assuming I've got a soldier and he has his arm on the shoulder of a Vietnamese guy who I'm assuming was a Kit Carson.
That was Kip, our Kit Carson scout. Yeah,
Tell us about him.
he was with us for a long time. I don't know a whole lot about him personally, but I believe he was VC, and he helped us find the enemy. You know, we were a reconnaissance platoon, so we're looking for signs of the enemy, and he knew of some things to look for that we didn't know. And he was good. I was a little untrusting, as I would have been of any ex-VC, but now after the fact, he did a good job. I remember that when we went to Cambodia, um, that many of the Kit Carson scouts didn't show up for duty. They did not want to go into Cambodia. This actually I didn't know until I read it in a book Gerald Berry wrote about the Operation Bente One. But he said a lot of the Kit Carson scouts disappeared, and ours didn't. And it's a good thing he didn't because we needed him. Yeah, he was important to be a interpreter for some prisoners that we took, and actually it was important in talking to them before we took them. So he was critical, and I'm glad he showed up.
And so even if you were a little reticent, he never gave you any reason
No,
to come to not trust him.
no. I mean, the first day I saw him, it was like, oh, there's an XVC with an M16. You know,
Mm, yeah.
it's a little unsettling, but he proved to be trustworthy.
You just mentioned prisoners. I'm assuming these would be NBA prisoners, although maybe there's some VC as well. But what memories do you have of them? Is it just NBA prisoners that you have?
It was just NVA. It was one incident where that was our first night in Cambodia, and we had set up a night perimeter, and they walked into it. And yeah, the situation was, we had 3 squads on the perimeter, and there was supposed to be 1 soldier awake in each squad all night long in 90-minute shifts. So I was asleep, and the guy, our squad guard, woke me up, and everybody else said, whispered, "Get up, somebody's coming."
Yeah.
And you could hear them coming because they were not on the trail; they were in the lead, so it was dry leaves, and you could hear them. And so I was on the opposite side of the perimeter from me, and the guy that was on the side they were approaching had a claymore mine, and he waited till they got really close and then blew the claymore, and they rolled behind a big fat tree, and It turned out one of them was killed by the claymore. We didn't know that till morning, but two of them were wounded and one was unhurt. And they weren't going to come out. You know, about a month later, we got a interrogation report from these guys that was circulated, and they had said we were in our training. We were told never ever surrender to an American because they'll torture you and you know it won't be good for you. And so they were very inclined to not surrender. But we waited till daylight started to break, and then we kind of spread out a little bit, and then everybody fired at once, just a um, big burst with the machine gun, the whole thing, like on both sides of the tree. So they probably took 1,000 rounds. And then we were done. The interpreters, I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I'm sure he was saying, can understand what he was saying. I'm sure he was saying, you might as well come out now, because if you don't, we can just fan out and we can, it'll be, you know, you're going to die or you're going to come out. So which is it? And it took them a long time to make a decision, but they finally decided to come out. And we told them, come out with your hands on your head. And there's only one guy able to come out, and that was the one that survived. And he came out with his hands on his head. The other two weren't walking. And so we had one dead and 3 POWs. It turned out the guy that was not wounded was a political officer, because before they gave up, he had documents with him and he burned them. We can see there was a fire behind the tree. What the heck's going on? And he was burning his papers, but he did not burn his. He had a picture of Ho Chi Minh, Chairman Mao, Marx, and Lenin. 4 pictures. They're big pictures, you know, and so we're thinking, why would he not burn those? You know, they're precious to him or something. But that's how we knew he was a political officer. Later on, when I'm reflecting back on the war decades later, I was glad that he made it clear to me why we were fighting. You know, that's a main thing we were fighting against was tyrants. And he made that clear.
At the time, what did you think you were fighting for?
I wasn't thinking about what I was fighting for at all. I was just trying to get to the end of the day. I wasn't thinking at all about why I was here. I was just figuring out, how do I get out of here?
When the 2 wounded prisoners were taken, did a medic with you guys then start tending to them?
Yeah, he patched them up. They were not seriously wounded, and they were pretending to be seriously wounded. You know, I think they were frightened, obviously, and so they had their eyes closed. They were pretending they were like comatose, but we knew they weren't because we could see what their injuries were. But that's okay. You know, we patched them up, and we had to make a couple of makeshift stretchers, you know, by cutting some saplings and putting a poncho between 2 saplings and then rolling them on to there. And then we had to carry them back to the base camp. And then back there, a battalion medic took over and patched them up some more.
Yeah. It wouldn't be surprising to me if there were some guys who are wondering, you know, why are we spending this time and energy taking care of these guys? You know, was there any of that at the time that you recall?
No, not that I recall. No, not at all.
Now, there was one instant, I mean, that you mentioned in your memoir, where there was an NVA who clearly was not going to survive, and the decision was made to basically put him out of his misery. Do I have that story right?
Yeah, that also was in Cambodia. That was the last full day in Cambodia, and we had just finished our biggest firefight, where we were engaged with a squad of NVA, and it took quite a while, but they were finally dispatched by artillery, you know, by calling in artillery behind them and then just walking it in until it collected them. And then when that was over, the platoon leader put me and my squad on the point, And we took over and we continued, and we ran into a trail immediately before everybody even got going. And while we were checking out the trail, this guy came walking down the trail and somebody dropped him. But I mean, to me, I couldn't even believe that anybody would be walking down a trail after the fight. Not only did we just have a fight, but we had one guy severely wounded, and we had a helicopter come in and drop a litter down, you know, a jungle extraction. And there'd been a helicopter hovering over for like 10 minutes and 85 rounds of artillery. And why would a guy come walking down a trail? Now, I could never explain that, but he did. And he was paralyzed and he was alive. And I was right up there, and you know, you could see no sign of life except his eyes were moving around, and he had a look of terror in his eyes, but the rest of him, he had no expression. And so we wanted to get out of there quick because we still felt we were in danger. And so there was no way to take him along, and if we left him, he would just sit there and suffer and die. So we felt the best thing to do was to put him out of his misery.
What were you told, or do you have any memory of being told why you were going into Cambodia? Because, you know, before this time, we've got these rules of engagement. You know, I hear from vets who say, well, we couldn't follow them into Cambodia. We couldn't even shoot into Cambodia. And now there's an incursion into Cambodia. Do you remember being told, you know, why the change or what this was all?
Yeah, yes. We were put in a staging area at New Plage Ring, and it was a big, wide open area, and ourselves and one other battalion was there. So there's two battalions all in one place. And there was officers coming around talking to our platoon leader, letting them know what's going on and what to expect. And you know, we knew that something had changed politically in Cambodia to where it was now okay to go in, where it wasn't a month ago. And but they were trying to explain what to be prepared for, and that you could tell they didn't know what we were going to encounter, because all they said was it's an NVA base area. This is where they train and where they store their ammo and their weapons. A lot of them live there. So when we go in, expect to be chasing them out of their place they live. And then they made a comment. They said, be ready too. They might have tanks. We don't know that, but we know that they did have tanks in that general vicinity at some point in the past. So it's possible they still have them. So all these comments they're making are in my head. And then we were on the staging area for 2 days, you know, thinking about it. And so I'm envisioning a scenario where you're flying in and dropping into somebody's town, and it's all military town. It's not civilian. And so there's a lot of images that you can imagine that come out of that. And I also remember that there was a reporter from the LA Times that walked by our platoon and said, anybody here from the greater Los Angeles area that I can talk to? And I was, but I didn't say a word because I didn't want to talk to any reporter from the LA Times. You know, I just let him walk on. The whole news media was there, and I'd never seen news media in Vietnam until that point or since it. And then all of a sudden they're everywhere. So that kind of added to the idea that something big is about to happen.
And how did the soldiers respond to these journalists? Sure.
Ignored them. But there was, I think it was 5 soldiers that refused to go in our battalion. And well, an officer came over and gave us a warning. He said, when it's time to go, you will go. If you refuse to go, you'll be going to the brig, and I'll make sure that you're punished to the full extent of the code of military. You know, you risk the riot, which really ticked me off. I don't really think that's a very smart way to prepare troops to go into a situation like that. It was horrible leadership, the worst. And I think maybe because of that, these 5 guys, they weren't in our platoon, but one of the other companies, there was 5 guys that just said, well, I don't have orders for Cambodia. My orders say Vietnam. I'm not going. It was a training facility, and inside there was a wooden model of a Huey helicopter, so it wasn't difficult to deduce that they were training soldiers how to shoot down a Huey, where you want to aim for, or how you want to hit it. So all the structures were burned. There was, I think, like around 200 structures like that were burned down, and there was a lot of bunkers and holes that were filled in, and
Wow.
and
So this is an NVA complex that had a wooden model of a Huey inside of it.
yeah.
Wow.
One of the line companies discovered some documents, and one of the documents was a letter from the leadership that came down to whoever was in charge down there, and it told them, you should be prepared, the Americans may invade, may be coming. And I mean, they knew it before I knew it, and it instructed them, you need to vacate the area, don't stand and fight, leave a stay behind force to slow or stop the Americans, and the rest of you grab as much equipment as you can and flee to the west. That's what the document said. So the guys that we were encountering and that we were fighting were a stay behind force that was very effective. We couldn't get very far because you kept running into them.
And how long were you in Cambodia altogether?
8 days. One thing that I was thankful for is that I was assigned to a unit in the Central Highlands, because now I haven't been anywhere else and done operations, so I don't, but I believe it was a good place to be, because most of the population was on the coast, and it was not dense like it was down in the Delta area. And so once you get inland, the villages are few and far between. There's a couple of big cities. But the area that we operated was out in the wilderness, the jungle, because that's where the enemy hid.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was pretty unusual for us to come across a village. We came across a few, but I was thankful for that, because I've seen all these stories of guys that had to operate in places like the Delta, where it's one village after another, and you're always dealing with is this guy enemy or friendly, and you don't know. So we had a minimal amount of that.
It sounds like you really just don't have really any sense of what's going on in South Vietnam, just in terms of you didn't spend a week in Saigon.
No,
There aren't towns that you can go into. You're not even dealing with traffic on Highway 1. I mean, you're out in the boonies,
that's right.
and even rarely coming across villages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we were on bases, there was a possibility to go into town, and I never once did that. Some guys would go in, and to me, it was not something I wanted to do. I never ever went into town. There's
Wow.
nothing. There's nothing good there.
Yeah. We you mentioned the one story, or you talked about the one story, you find the photo on the NVA, and there's kind of that, unpleasant realization, although it's, you have to put it away quickly, that, okay, here's a human being who has interests similar to mine. There's another case you describe where I believe there's a firefight of some kind. And afterwards you hear a female VC crying. What was that story?
Well, that was only about 2 days after the NVA guy, and that was on the same trail the NVA guy had come down, just in a different place. And we had come down looking for the trail, and when we found it, we were tired, so we just sat down and took a break. When we were taking a break, we heard voices coming from the left, and they were speaking Vietnamese. So we thought, okay, somebody's coming. The problem was the guys that were up close to the trail were very close, and they were wanting to get back and get some cover. There's a little bit of rustling around, and we were all telling everybody, just freeze, don't move, don't make any noise, don't make, whatever. And it was turned out to be a VC squad. It was the guys in front said there were 6 or 7, and there's a little rise in the trail, and they came across the rise. And as soon as they crossed the rise, they stopped and looked around, and then they backed up. And that really freaked us out, because why would anybody going down a trail back up? They must have sensed something, some danger ahead. You know, did they see us? Did they hear us? What? And then our guys really started to panic. You know, I think they know we're here, you know, and we don't have much cover except a few little trees here. What are we going to do? And then they came back across, and the guys in the front dropped the first 2. And they said that they saw 2 women in the group. And then after the survivors, you know, took off, it was a couple of minutes later, we heard a woman, she was wailing, you know, just crying uncontrollably. And so I would assume, you know, that one of the guys that was up front was maybe a good friend, a boyfriend, a husband, at least a comrade, and she wasn't dealing with it well. And so our lieutenant called in some artillery and put it down where it sounded like the sound was coming from. We didn't chase them. We just put the artillery down there and then turned around and backed up. And that was another thing that I had, you know, and I get, you know, how do I feel about fighting with, you know, shooting at women, you know, not good. It's just a conundrum that's not solvable. She's carrying an AK-47, so it doesn't really matter what gender she is, but it's not what we signed up for, you know.
Now, you served with a reconnaissance unit. Did you know that you would be doing that when you arrived in Vietnam?
No, I didn't know anything. On the flight over, I had no idea where in the country I was going, what unit, what kind of unit. I had no idea. And when I got to Pleiku, where the 4th Division I had been assigned, I still didn't know which battalion I was going to or what my job would be. And then I went to the 3rd Battalion, and the infantry went to their office, and they said, "Okay, we got a spot for you in the recon platoon." And so they told me where to go, and I went down to the headquarters for the 3rd Battalion, 8th Infantry, and I walked into supply, and I said, "Well, I need weapons and supplies and things to go out in the field." And the supply sergeant said to me, "Where are you going, troop?" You know, and I said, "Recon." And he said, "Oh man, I'm sorry." He gave his condolences. He said, "Those are a bunch of crazy savages over there." That was another one of those things that stuck in my mind forever, because it was like that the first day when they're ambushed. You know, it's that thing. It's like, oh my God, am I going to join a group of crazy savages? And then I'm thinking to myself, well, I know I'm not a crazy savage, but maybe they're going to turn me into one. So the whole time I was there, in my mind was resisting becoming a savage. And now, as it turned out, that was an uncalled for comment, as many things that were in my mind were false. They weren't a bunch of crazy savages. There were some that were, you know, I heard stories of some that were, but I came to be thought I was very fortunate to be put into reconnaissance. Most guys, if you asked them when they got there, you want to go into recon, or what, they go, "Oh no, I don't want to go into recon. Sounds dangerous." Well, truth is, those of us that were in it felt the opposite once we were in it for a while, and that's because while the line companies are out doing maneuvers and search and destroy and making a lot of noise, and you know, we're off somewhere doing reconnaissance, and our job is to stay quiet and stay incognito, and to us that meant, you know, be silent and be invisible and basically hide. You know, what we were doing is we became expert hiders, and you know, move quietly, don't leave anything behind, any signs of that you were ever there, that kind of thing. So we felt more secure at, as a reconnaissance platoon than we thought we would have felt if we were in a line company.
So it's substantially information gathering,
Well,
intelligence gathering.
that's the textbook. That's the primary objective. But the tactical operations command could use us for whatever they wanted, and so it would be more common for us to go on a pure reconnaissance mission. But if they wanted us to go engage somebody, they could order us to do that. It's not like we never did it. And then we had one instance where we were designated as a rear reactionary force. So we were on a fire base, and we were told everybody be on 15 minutes notice in case some other element gets in danger. You're going to hop on helicopters and go support them. And we did that once, but that was not reconnaissance. And we did get called into action on that deal too.
So a quick reaction force then, in that case.
Yeah. On a typical mission, a battalion mission might last 5 weeks. And in the beginning, we'd be put somewhere and given some instruction like, go this direction, see what you can find up in this area, whatever it was. And we'd do a reconnaissance thing. And then after some period of time, if we weren't finding anything, they might say, okay, we're going to pull you and we're going to try you somewhere, So while the battalion mission didn't change, our recon mission might change several times during a 5-week mission operation. So we would go somewhere else and do this, and then go somewhere else and do that. Almost always get picked up by Hueys and dropped off on Hueys.
These are 5 weeks where, to the extent there's bathing at all, it's going to be in a pond or a river, or no bathing at all, or
Right. We come to a river, we would sometimes take time to give guys a chance to go down in groups and wash up a little bit. But
and how many would go out in the reconnaissance unit?
Okay, the platoon was supposed to be 30, and it in general it averaged 25 to 30. So it was 3 rifle squads and a headquarters squad. And each rifle squad, like I was the squad leader for one of the 3 squads, and I had 7 or 8 guys in my squad. And then one of those was a radio telephone operator. So each squad leader had a radio, and the platoon leader had a radio. So in those instances where we split up, the squad could go off on their own and then still communicate with the platoon leader or the other squads if needed.
And if the objective is to go out and, be quiet and gather information, that's hard to do with 25 or 30 guys.
Yeah, it is. And so that's why we felt like we had to be quiet. We always moved extremely slow. We were never in a hurry to get anywhere. And we never, in the morning, somebody might have an objective for us to go be somewhere, and we'd make an attempt. We'd go in the right direction, but we were not concerned about whether we made it or not. We were just putting one foot in front of the other, being careful. And when it was late enough to where you had to set up a defensive perimeter for the night, we'd set it up wherever the lieutenant thought was a defensible position, regardless of where we were supposed to be.
And if you're out with 25, 30 guys, how spread out would you be? Because I've seen some of the photos where you've got guys, walking in the boonies, and they're maybe 10 feet apart, something like that.
Yeah.
So you've got that number of guys, but are they just under normal circumstances, just pretty spread out like that?
Yeah, that's typical. So it's a pretty long line.
Yeah. And that's in case, just if you don't bunch up, right?
Yeah, don't bunch up, because if a mortar round comes in, you don't want to all be standing in one place. The way we moved was at any time there was one rifle squad on the point, and then came the headquarters squad with the platoon leader, and then the other 2 rifle squads brought up the rear. And then we would go for a period until the lieutenant decided we're getting tired. It's a good time for a rest or a lunch break or something. And then he'd send the word up to find a spot. And then we'd form a rough perimeter, have our lunch or whatever, take our break. And then when it was time to go, the squad behind the headquarters squad would pass us and take the lead. And the one that had been the lead would stay sitting until everybody was gone and they'd go recycle to the rear. So we were alternating squads on the point.
The idea being that the guys in the point, that's the most stressful
Yeah.
place, yeah.
So share the stress, kind of.
Sure. When you look back to these months of service in the Central Highlands, is there any one particular memory or one particular mission that most stands out in your mind, that is more memorable than the others just because of the way it kind of fixed itself into your memory?
Well, yeah, without question, it was the Bente 1, Operation Bente 1, which was the Cambodian incursion. It was crazy because the first group to go, which was a battalion actually of the 101st Airborne, which had been assigned, put under 4th Division control, because one of our battalions had been incapacitated just a couple of weeks prior, where the command helicopter was shot down with a battalion commander on board and a lot of his senior staff. So their leadership was decimated and they weren't able to go into to battle immediately. So they borrowed the third of the 506th of the 101st Airborne. They went first, but nobody knew how to do a mass scale combat stuff like this helicopter. So the first sortie was, I believe it was 20 helicopters, and the pilots had normally gone single file, but they'd never gone 20 at a time. So it was such a long line. They doubled up. They were going double file. And when they got there, every opening had enemy firing at the helicopters. So it was a big mess. You had 20 helicopters flying around in circles, and then they'd try to get in and they couldn't because of the ground fire. And so after a while, they had to abort the mission, and all 20 of them came back. And so then it's like, okay, that didn't work. So the next time we're going to send a much smaller group of helicopters. We'll get a defensible force on the ground, and then once they radio back that they're on the ground, now we'll send the rest, kind of thing. And that's the way it went for the rest of the operation.
Yeah.
By the time they got to us, it was already in that mode where there was, I don't know how many helicopters, probably less than 10 at a time. When the first group of helicopters went, they were rejected a couple of times, and then they picked a spot and they didn't get any fire, so they went in there and landed, and they were being drawn into a trap. The enemy was intentionally not firing. Their strategy appeared to be, let's don't fire until there's 2 helicopters on the ground, then we're going to open up. So when the second helicopter landed, they opened up. They decapacitated the first helicopter. The second helicopter, the passengers got off and they tried to escape, and they started taking off and they got shot out of the air. And that's where, the pilot and one of the door gunners was killed when that helicopter crashed, and 2 of the crewmen survived. And that was still on the helipad. That helicopter wreckage was sitting there for quite a while. And so the recon platoon came in the second day. So by the time we came in, order had been established. We didn't have enemy shooting at us as we came in. So we got in without incident.
Now coming to the end of your tour, so you're sick, you take up the ARVN soldier's offer to enjoy this meal. You do get sick, and you go to Japan, and then you're back to the States. And once you're back in the States, where are we in? Are we in late 1970 now? When you're back in the States, mid 1970?
September of 1970.
Okay,
when I got back to the hospital at Fort Ord.
Okay, so you're back in the States in the fall of 1970. And then how long was it before you were civilian again?
Um, I'd say less than 2 weeks. It's kind of a miracle the way things worked out. In Japan, I told the doctor I need to get moved along because I have an early out to go start college on September. It was like the last week of September. And he said, well, you can forget about that because what you've got, you're not going to, the Army will not discharge a sick soldier. You're going to have to stay until you're medically discharged. So forget college. That's what he told me. And so when I got to Fort Ord, um, they couldn't find anything wrong with me. They took blood tests and they didn't see what was reported on the documents. So the doctor checked me out. He said, "You're doing good." And he said, I can't explain it. He said, I can't explain how that blood test from Quinn Yon and this blood test from Fort Ord could be from the same guy 3 weeks apart. I don't have an explanation. And so he said, you're doing okay. He said, so if you want, you can go home Friday night. Because I lived in Burbank, pretty close, short flight. And he said, I'm not authorized to give you a pass, but he said, if you want to go home, and as long as you're back in here Sunday night between the sheets, there'll be no record that you ever left. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I actually went down to Monterey Airport, flew home, spent Friday and Saturday night, flew back, got back in the sick bed, and they started processing discharge papers because they couldn't find a reason to keep me. And they finally discharged me on a Wednesday, and I started classes on the following Monday.
Good grief.
Yeah, it was very, very brutal transition.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, how does that go? Because you're sitting in classes with people who are, a bit younger than you, a bit younger than you chronologically, a lot younger than you in terms of life experience. You must have felt like an alien.
I definitely felt like an alien. Totally. Good description. No, first of all, I didn't let anybody know that I was a veteran. So I didn't wear the hat. I didn't wear anything to give me away, and nobody ever knew. And um, I was kind of in a frame of mind of, well, I got out of there. It was my desire to not have the war follow me into my civilian life. I didn't want my military experience to define my life. And so the one way to do that is don't wear the hat, don't initiate, that'll start conversations, and then you'll have to talk to people. We don't want that. I was very, very isolated. I didn't connect with anybody. I didn't connect with students. I didn't connect with faculty. I just went to school every day and did my stuff, and then I burned my free time. I was a go-kart racer, so I used to spend ungodly hours working on my equipment. But so those are two things I had passion for. So I just spend my time on stuff I have passion for and try my best to forget everything else.
So you said that you wanted to put it behind you. Was that also a feeling that, if I did want to talk about it, no one cares anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. It was clear nobody cared anyway. And it's good because I didn't want to talk about it anyway. So it was mutual.
Did you have that experience when you were in college of just kind of this um, uh, weird realization that, the war is still going in Vietnam?
Yeah.
And so that's still going on over there. And now here, I'm in this class, and this guy or woman in front of the class is talking about whatever, and these young people around me have no idea what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Just that kind of feeling that it's a surreal situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You hit it on the head right there. Yeah.
Yeah. When did your mind turn on that and you decided, maybe Vietnam's something that I do want to think about and something I'm maybe even willing to talk about?
Well, here's what happened is one day, I'm gonna guess it was probably around 2007, 8-ish, somewhere around in there. I was watching TV and I was flipping through the channels and I came across a Vietnam documentary with combat footage. And I hadn't thought about it for decades. I tried specifically not to think about it. And all of a sudden it was there and I had this weird thought in my head, like, oh my God, that looks familiar. Was I really there? And it was a fraction of a second. I thought, I think it was a dream. I don't think I was really there. And then I was thinking about it and I thought, well, wait a minute, I have photographs that prove that I actually had
Yeah.
that. And then I said, oh, of course you were there.